everyone. My name's Stephanie Stadel. I'm a software developer at Bloomberg and a very proud member of Bloomberg's Women in Technology group, BWIT. BWIT is a group within Bloomberg's women community that focuses on encouraging women to be leaders in technology and share their passion with young women pursuing STEM, education, and career paths. I'm very excited to be introducing tonight's session of the Bloomberg Speaker Series, the Cornell Tech Bloomberg Speaker Series, a conversation on female entrepreneurship. For those who are new to this program, the goal of this series is to give students, Bloomberg employees, and the wider tech community opportunities to learn more about what leaders in the tech field are currently thinking and doing. Our guests tonight include the entrepreneurs Katya Beecham, Britt Morin, and Nadia Bujarwa. Please give them all a very warm welcome.
Charlotte Fu. I'm here at Bloomberg Television, and I'm going to moderate this panel. I want to welcome each of our guests, and I want you guys to go back in time and share with us your 30-second elevator pitch of your business.
The original?
Well, okay, you can alter it for the changes that have been that have taken place since then. But why don't we start with you, Katya?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Katya. Birchbox is about 6.5 years old, and when we launched Birchbox, we had an insight around making beauty discovery and shopping better, and we recognized that there was real potential to bring beauty shopping online. It's still less than 6% online today, so that was the initial insight. But today we're very focused on something that we think is an even bigger mission, which is delivering beauty to the majority of women who are not obsessed with beauty, and that's what I think about all the time. So I'm obsessed with building a beauty company for women who are not obsessed with beauty, and so we do.
Nadia?
Awesome. So I'm Nadia. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dia & Co. We are, I guess, 2.5 years old at this point, and Dia was founded really on the belief that women of all sizes wanted to participate in fashion. So we serve exclusively women's sizes 14 and above, which in the US today makes up about 67% of the population. The average size in the US is between 16 and 18. But that same group of women in the US spends about 17% of apparel dollars. And that was the fundamental equation that we built our business to fix. So today we operate as a personalized online shopping service for women, and I would imagine that continues to evolve as we kind of remain in pursuit of extraordinary service for our customer.
Britt?
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Britt, and when I was 5 years old, I thought I was a creative person. I played with Legos and blocks and colored a lot, and then I realized 20 years later, at the age of 25, that I suddenly started telling people I wasn't that creative, and all of my girlfriends started saying the same thing. And my light bulb moment for Brit & Co. was wondering what happened during that Delta period of time. Why do we as adult women suddenly feel like we aren't creative people anymore? And there are a lot of things that went into that, but ultimately I founded Brit & Co. As a means to empower women to be more creative. And today we are a media company that reaches over 100 million people a month. We have an online learning platform where women can take courses to be more creative. And we have products and merchandise as well that supports that vision.
All right, so let's start with the universal challenge that something men and women struggle with alike, which is fundraising. Is it more difficult for women? Nadia, what do you think?
I think it is. I think it's.
Hell yes.
Hell yes.
Emphatic hell yes.
It's hard to look at the numbers any way in the world and not come to the conclusion that the cards are stacked against female founders. I believe the stat is currently that 93% of VCs are men, and I think, it would be irrational to assume that that is a bias that doesn't impact decision making. Probably for the case of all three of us, we're also building businesses for women. So not only is it a problem in interacting with somebody kind of at the founder level with a venture capitalist, but actually getting them to understand why the product that you're bringing to market serves such a profound need for a customer that is very foreign to them is, I would say, a secondary hurdle that makes it very challenging to raise money as a female founder.
Yeah, it's like a double dink,
Yeah.
for sure. To be a woman and also build a business for a female consumer.
But it's really awesome when they say that they're going to ask their wives or their daughters what they think.
I've had many administrative assistants come into the room. I've had wives called in meetings. And look, that's a logical way of, kind of learning a little bit more. But, one thing that was staggering to me was that the fundamental numbers about the beauty industry. The beauty industry is the fastest growing mature industry that exists. It's $500 billion today, and in 2010, less than 5% of it was sold on the internet. I mean, at a fundamental level, somebody was going to win that, right? And of course, I think it's more logical that as a female consumer, we could relate more to the reason why it wasn't happening. You know, I think that we could put the pieces together and say, consumers want something that's at the intersection of efficacy, like deliver me the right product, and delight. And that's a truth, I think, for all consumers, not just female consumers, but I think we could really understand what that would look like in a different way. And it was extremely hard to paint that picture if you're a first mover in a category.
So, Britt, do you then go out and target female investors? I mean, is there a pushback from female investors who say, hey, you're only coming to me because I'm a woman and you expect me to sign on because I'm a woman?
No, I think the female investors actually generally really supportive and empowering towards female entrepreneurs. There are just so few of them, to your point. And a lot of them are actually earlier stage, and I found a lot of them to be earlier stage investors too. So as you're raising growth capital, it is much, even probably a bigger percentage male. But I do think that's the only way to really change the equation of empowering more females to become entrepreneurs, is to have more females as investors who can support, that roadmap for us.
And of course, a lot of our audience members are at school, at business school. They might be at Cornell Tech, they might be at Columbia, they might be in the community. So you want to leverage your existing networks as well. For Katya and Nadia, it's Harvard Business School. Britt, you worked at Apple, you worked at Google. Your husband is in the same industry, so you have a pretty wide circle of acquaintances. My question though is, what if you lack those credentials? What if you don't belong to any one of those tribes? How do you go about finding and nurturing this network?
One piece of advice that we got at the beginning was that it's very hard to pitch a business kind of in the concept phase as a woman, but what everyone understands is traction. And so one of our first goals was to do whatever we could to prove that they didn't have to believe us. The proof was in the pudding, and we did that. And I think that that's something that truly investors at the end of the day, if you can get beyond belief and into rational decision making, they will make the rational decisions in the end. I think the initial hurdle is higher, and traction was our hack to getting there.
Yeah, I think in the early days, there's a lot that can hold you back from starting a company if that's your ambition. And a lot of times you can make excuses, whether it's, you can't bring your full idea to fruition because you're not somebody that's a technologist, or whether you don't have connections in, the investor community, so you can't launch. But I totally agree. I think the barriers to entry to launching a business are lower than ever. It's actually pretty inexpensive to get a minimum viable product out there. And traction speaks absolute volumes. For us, my co-founder and I, neither of us were in technology, neither of us were in beauty. And I cold emailed every CEO of the beauty industry that you can imagine. I started my cold emailing hobby with Steve Jobs that got back to me right before I went to business school.
Really?
And it worked. It worked. My recipe for cold emailing is as follows. Very compelling subject line. An email that you can read without scrolling on a device, right, a smartphone. And no business plan attached. So we had like a one-pager attached to dive in more. And then you ask for something that's pretty hard to say no to, which in our case wasn't, will you participate in Birchbox and give us free samples? It was, can you have 5 minutes to give me advice? And then that turned into a meeting, and then the meeting turned into a pitch, and then the pitch got us working with Kiehl's and Benefit and massive brands early on, which helped build our brand and our credibility amongst, and frankly, like investors, we were able to meet with investors. We were lucky because we were at Harvard, but they were so skeptical. Their feedback was, this is just not going to work initially. No one's going to pay for sampling. That's a behavior that doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's also just hustle, right? You probably emailed 100, I don't know.
It's shocking how few, but now my cold emailing still persists.
I come from the
big part of my
I came from the tech industry at Google and Apple, but I didn't know people in the media industry. I didn't know much about this world at all, and it's just a matter of hustle, pure networking, like what you're doing right now, getting out there, meeting as many people as you can. Cold tweets, I think, are also the new cold email.
Twitter didn't exist. How weird.
Yeah, cold tweeting. Donald Trump's bringing it back. So long live Twitter. But find people. Yeah, send them metrics. Send them a tweet with a screenshot of your chart, your graph that just goes up into the right hockey stick growth, and then they'll pay attention to you.
And by the way, you can always manipulate the y-axis to make your y-axis is a really critical part of your pitch deck.
I think we need to banner that. I spoke with someone who launched a network for women entrepreneurs, and one of her frustrations, she told me, was when a woman says she's going to change the world with her business idea, everyone assumed that she was starting or running a nonprofit rather than a company that was out to make money. People don't make that assumption when a man says he's going to change the world, but they always assume that she's starting a nonprofit. What do you think about that? Nadia?
I've definitely kind of observed that bias before. Yeah. I think that one of the things that's important in the early meetings is to have audacious goals. Like, talk about building a big business. Talk about wanting to create massive wealth. Talk about wanting to change the world, not just because you have a mission, but because you have a capitalistic view on life, and there's change that can happen through capitalism that you are supportive of. And I think that the more that we emphasize that these are things that are important to us as female founders, the more people come to expect them from us. And if anyone thought we were building a nonprofit business, they didn't think it for very long in our meetings. So.
What kind of assumptions do people make about women and female entrepreneurs that they don't make about men?
Well, I think there's two things. To your point, I think women are they are more realistic when it comes to what they're going to achieve and how they're going to achieve it. A lot of men carry bigger egos, so their 3-year plan might look totally insane, but they sound as if they fully believe it. And women are, again, going to be a little bit more realistic in that approach and probably actually hit the numbers that they say. And then on the flip side, I think that there just haven't been, this is the sad truth, there haven't been many female entrepreneurs with multi-billion-dollar exits. And we need more of them. We need more women who are successful to give the industry more confidence that the rest of us are all going to achieve those types of exits as well. And so we'll get there, we're getting there. There's more and more traction as we go, but we are behind.
But I think a huge part of that is what you said earlier, which is access to growth capital. Because I think it actually comes back later on. So in the very early days of Birchbox, the actual subject line that I sent to the CEOs was that we are going to reinvent the beauty industry forever. So it was a big, audacious, thing. But what I found actually that I think is pretty profound is as you build and scale a very massive business, we're in 6 countries, we have 4 million active customers, this is when your actual audaciousness as a woman, I think, comes more into question than it does for women, than it does for men. I actually find that as you get more and more bold and further down, there's skepticism about whether you are grounded enough versus for a man, I think it's seen much more as visionary forever.
So there's pushback with your numbers, your projections.
I think when you're thinking as big as you're thinking, in my mind, we represent the majority of women. Why wouldn't I believe that we can build the largest beauty retailer in the world, right? The 80%. That's a logical conclusion. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's harder and harder to kind of have that audacious, thinking, that visionary thinking later on, because they assume, I don't know, that you're the consumer, that you're having an emotional reaction, that you really like lipstick, or, and rather you're looking at the market and you're saying, I will say this out loud, I got so lucky with timing, right? The market was ready for my product when it happened, and the consumer was waiting for somebody to prioritize them. And I feel like this is arbitrage, right? Somebody will be an alternative to Sephora, and why wouldn't it be us? But again, when you're talking about creating multi-billions of dollars of value, all of a sudden there's skepticism. And I actually think for men with a proven track record, and I will say I think I have a proven track record, that skepticism isn't as present.
Nadia, I see you nodding a lot.
Well, I think our businesses are very similar in that the numbers speak for themselves. We are also serving the majority of women that the majority of retailers ignore. And so for us to be able to say that we see $80 billion of value being created in plus size apparel in the next 10 years should not be really a statement that anyone questions. That's just the way the math works. And in some ways, I think maybe we go after problems that are more obvious because who could argue with that? It's 67% of the population. She's not less interested in style, I promise you. And I think it's just a matter of saying, we're not trying to build a small business, right? We're going after a big market because we're trying to build a business of enduring scale.
And frankly, on the contrary, I think to what Britt said, we are, I mean, for those of us who've had the privilege of having success, I think we're very motivated to have massive outcomes so that we can continue to support other women, right? I mean, that is, if not the biggest motivation, it is up there.
Yeah, I think
Like,
every female panel or other women entrepreneurs I've met all care deeply about supporting the next class, and there's almost this inner. Do you guys agree? There's kind of this inner
It's
club
new, too.
of female entrepreneurs that support other female entrepreneurs, and even the Gen X and beyond, female CEOs and investors. It's a known thing, and everyone's supporting one another, and I think that it's only hopefully going to get better.
So there's this idea that perhaps one way to make sure that women get just as many opportunities as men when you are raising funds is to perhaps obscure, hide, or diminish your gender during that fundraising effort. Britt, I know that you've written about this and thought about this a lot. There is this proposal that women perhaps use their initials only when submitting pitches when fundraising. Why is that a bad idea?
Do I have to? I mean, that's a rhetorical question, but yeah.
Well, some guy posted and he thought it was a perfectly sensible solution.
Yeah.
Well, eventually they will see you.
Right. Eventually they're going to meet you in person if they're going to invest in you. So you probably shouldn't lie. Or you have to be yourself. And I think that try to use it to your advantage. I was young. I started the company at 25. It was my first company. However, I was squarely in the middle of the demographic I was trying to reach, an 18 to 35-year-old woman. I understood that psychographic more than any of the investors that were investing in this company. I had a track record of success at the companies I was at prior to starting this. So, you can be yourself, you can be authentic, and think about the strength of who you are and your experiences to leverage yourself in those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add to that we're firmly of the belief that you create truly enduring value in a business by actually resonating with a customer. And to the extent that you are uniquely positioned as a CEO to understand and build a product around your customer, I would celebrate that all day. Right? That these are emotional products. These are products that you want to be able to build deep connections with your customers with. That's critical. That's how, the businesses that have changed the world have succeeded.
I also think it's a little bit of the inverse is true right now. I mean, I think the Silicon Valley, Silicon Alley, they're getting a lot of flack for not investing in women, and frankly, they're looking for females to invest in. So they're taking the meetings, and I would say, we've benefited a lot from the fact that people were looking for women to meet with, to put on a stage, to, those kinds of things are happening too. So I don't think it's a bad time to be a woman and to fundraise as a woman, and to at least get the meetings. Mm-hmm. But it is challenging when you're pitching people who are not going to be your customer.
Well, let's talk a little bit about business model versus mission. For your businesses, some people might argue, why are you focusing on a content website that targets young women or young moms who want to be crafty? Why not target all people who want to be crafty, or plus size clothing for women as opposed to plus size clothing for everyone, for children maybe, for adults, for males? There can be an argument made that male entrepreneurs don't seem to limit their market to men. So why are female entrepreneurs limiting their market to women?
I think it's the audience that we know the best, and we know that, and because we know them so well, we know of the massive problems that exist in these categories, that of the audience that's not being served. And like I just said, we're the best to serve them with that. So I also think, in terms of scope, you have so many resources when you're starting out, and you have to pick a narrow segment. So it's like Facebook started just at Harvard, and then they expanded to one more campus and one more campus. So I think if you're going to pick the most narrow segment you can think of, you should know that audience really well to sort of ensure that you're going to be successful with them.
So that's not to say that there won't be crafty men that you'll be targeting soon.
Perhaps not. I see you.
Nadia, what do you think?
I think focus begets success. I think, we don't choose markets at random. We choose markets that are large. We choose markets that are compelling, and then we focus on them. I think that that's actually the most rational way to build a business. I think as you perfect a market, you earn the right to enter other markets. And as long as you're doing it in a way that is authentic to who you are as a brand, so we are and will always be a plus-size brand. Should we serve plus-size men one day? Probably. That's certainly not off the table. But, I think when you're trying to move very fast and you're trying to build a business with scale and with strong relationships with your customers, focus begets success.
And one thing I heard from you, Nadia, and in fact from all three of you, is that you don't identify with the business model. You identify with your customer or the community that you serve. My question is, how do you hold firm to that and avoid getting boxed into thinking through a narrow lens of whatever the business model of the day is, whether it's subscription model, an advertising model, whatever is in vogue? How do you avoid that?
I think, it's actually like, how can you not think about the customer? The world is doing the work for you, right? The reality of what a consumer is experiencing and their expectations is changing so exponentially every single day that if you don't think about your job as staying relevant to your consumer, then you've missed the point. That is our vision. It's to be powerfully relevant through deep respect, and we do think that is a completely different way of thinking about building a consumer product company, because it means that you are not loyal to your product. You actually have to be somebody who could really question whether your product is going to hold up over time, but you say, I'm going to be loyal to my consumer. We are going to serve the 80% of women who are not obsessed with beauty, and whatever technology, whatever innovations there are to give her that experience, that is what we'll pursue. But I do think it's really challenging. And you asked a question about bad advice, and I'd say some of the worst advice we got at Birchbox was to lose focus early on. I mean, people pushing us and saying, like, why don't you do this in every single category? Like in our first year, why don't you do it in fashion? Why don't you do it in dogs? Why don't you do it in? And we said we really believe this is massive and multi-billion dollars in and of itself, and we will focus. But it was kind of fighting against what people were saying they wanted to see us do, to show our ambition.
Well, how comfortable are any of you with releasing a beta version of your business when you know it's not 100% ready? I know that entrepreneurs always have to just kind of, there's an advantage to being the first mover, right? But what if it's not ready? Discuss the temptation of waiting until you get something perfect, just the way you had planned.
It is never ready.
Yeah, it's never perfect.
It's never ready. If you could have gone 7 years ago to when Birchbox was a twinkle in our eye, I mean, I would say that today it is not what we even still then believed it could be. Right? It is 100% never ready. And I actually think I was talking to somebody who's a product person who's a woman on my team today, and she was talking about her first startup that was a failure. She started so young, and it's so impressive. And I was saying, well, there was something really freeing about not being somebody that came from technology and product and design that allowed you to just expect that your product was going to be pretty bad to look at. I mean, our first product was so ugly. And everything about it was clunky. And it was like, despite itself, it was working. Like the actual insight resonated so much that it almost was a better test, because as we made the user experience from the physical product to the digital product more beautiful, more fluid, more natural, we knew that there would only be upside. So in some ways it freed us a lot to now try to move a lot faster with launching things before they're really ready.
Yeah, I'd say there's no temptation to wait at Dia. We experiment all day, every day. We founded our business that way. We never launched as a business. We started with 6 testers. We've now worked with 1 million women, and there was never, we just kept going. We learned, we iterated, we adjusted and moved forward, and that's the philosophy that we have in everything that we do. And absolutely, sometimes you see stuff that we're doing that looks a little wacky, and either you're never going to see it again or you're going to see a much better version soon. But there's no way to know. And I think that one of the things that's probably true about both of our businesses is because we're not tied to a product and we're tied to a customer, we're going to want to put stuff in front of her all the time. And really having flexibility around a business model means that you are testing new things. So no temptation at all to wait for perfection at Dia.
Yeah, the difference with Brit & Co. than these companies is that as a content creator, we're putting out about 100 pieces of content every day. And I learned very early on in the tech side of my career at Google to just test and iterate as much as possible. Like we used to test 18 different shades of blue for a button to see which one performed better in terms of the click conversion. And now with hundreds of pieces of content, daily, we are testing headlines, images, engagement length. Should we show the full article on a page or truncate it and see read more? Like there are so many tests running, and when you're creating a physical product, which we do as well, but it's separate. Like you've got one shot to give it a go, and it takes several months, and there's R&D, and so I feel like there are different ways to iterate quickly as a media company, and it sucks though because like nothing is ever perfect. Like I can't look at every piece of content we put out every day. Like I have OCD, and I would freak out that like that sentence wasn't formulated correctly, and I would have ended it with in a different way, and so I'm sure you do this too on Bloomberg. Just the way that the content comes together, but we get so many chances to do that over and over again that it ultimately gets better over time.
And Nadia, you were telling me that one way you incorporate changes, you make course corrections, is you go out and meet your customer. You were on a 6-city listening tour where you were talking to your customer, finding out her preferences, her needs. In many cases, they ended up being recruited into your company as well. That can be very emotional.
It can be. So we are very proud of the fact that we have customers in every county. We have customers in every MSA. We now have customers in nearly 80% of zip codes in the country. These women are different. And actually going out and spending time with her in her context was some of the best things that we could do for different functional leaders of our team to actually understand how the decisions that they're making, who they're impacting, right? Like who's on the other side of all these decisions? How do we continue to learn who she is? She's obviously changed as we've scaled. And the woman who we meet with in Nashville is completely different from the woman who we meet with in Baton Rouge, who's completely different from the woman in Albuquerque. And we need to know all of them. So, I think that's probably one of the best decisions we made was to take the team on the road.
When we talk about emotion and the passion that you exude when you're talking about your business and you're speaking with people in the industry, how does that passion and that emotion work against you? Can it work against you as a female entrepreneur, Katya?
Well, I think that it's really, I guess I ascribe to the belief that like net, it's a positive. But it is extremely challenging to have distance from who you are and what you've built. And I think in some ways it can work against you, like yourself, and not necessarily against the fundraise or closing a deal, but against how you feel about yourself, because it is such a roller coaster. In any given day, you could have like 18 highs and 70 lows. It's not like this was a good day. It's never that simple, right? And so when so much of your self-worth is wrapped up in the business and you care so much about it, everything feels personal. But at the same time, another piece of advice that I heard a lot from men that I just fundamentally disagree with was this idea that you can't bring love into what you do, particularly with teams. Men were constantly saying to me, don't tell your team they're a family, tell them that they're a sports team, right? Like treat them like a sports team, not a family. That was the advice.
But you're a gun for hire kind of thing?
No, like basically like you care about them, but like ultimately they're replaceable, right? Okay, like it's not that I necessarily disagree that there's people that can do similar jobs, but the way I wanted to go to work was with a lot more heart than that. I wanted to be able to care and love the people, and frankly, I just completely disagreed with what they were afraid of. They're afraid that because I love people that I work with, because I love my team and I'm grateful for them being there at that kind of level, that I can't fire them. Which is so wrong, because any of us will tell you, as much as we love these people who've come to build our vision, the entity and the vision is the first thing you love, right? So anybody who's challenging that, you can 100% be like, I love you, you're fired. Right? And I think that's hard for men to understand, that we could do that we could actually say like, I have that kind of care and love for everything we do, but I'm also a business person, and the thing that I love the most is the actual entity, the entire piece of it, right? So I think it does hurt, but I wouldn't trade it. It is such a wonderful life.
Right?
Yeah, I put my name in the brand, so there's some passion right there. Like I get the question a lot in investor meetings. Honestly, it's the same question. What happens if you get hit by a bus tomorrow? And I don't know why it's always a bus. Like, could be an Uber, could be like on the subway. But anyways, I did that because I was so passionate about what I was building, but it also has kept me on track in terms of how we expand and grow. In the media industry, there are a lot of ways to garner traffic that aren't always like the best tactical ways to build a brand. And we haven't gone there. We don't, cover a lot of topics that are taboo. We stay pretty true to who we are because I think largely in part, like I feel so passionate about this being a a long-lasting company, and I feel so passionate about our mission and our cause that I don't want to put my name on the line to take us off course. And it's funny because 100 years ago, almost every business was named after a person. We're in the Bloomberg building. Disney, you might know, Walmart, Porsche, Hershey's, Rockefeller, like all of these brands were named after people, and it was because you wanted to know that person. You wanted to believe that it was an authentic vision, that you could talk to them if like you had questions. Even today in small town America, there's like George's Auto Parts and Jane's Nails, and like Jane, she does your pedicures, and that's the environment I was trying to create. So in my case, I think passion for the company has taken me in a totally different direction to keep it kind of within these guardrails of ever going too far off course.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the current environment. In terms of the mission, the urgency towards building or working towards profitability, it seems to have accelerated over the last couple of years. It's not something that we had seen maybe in 2007, 2008, certainly not 2009. But Nadia, if you could talk a little bit about the current environment, what have you observed?
I think these are all healthy things. I think there's absolutely more of a focus on businesses that have unit economics that make sense. I don't think that that's something that should be bad. I imagine that most female founders think about their business that way anyways. And we certainly focus on that. We've grown very quickly, but we increased our gross margin by 50% last year. And that's something that is not a sub-bullet, it's like a headline of the business that we're building, and it doesn't come at the expense of growth. I think overall, many businesses, the environment just kind of got ahead of itself. And the truth is that it's not just about growth. At some point, businesses need to earn money. And I think it's a really healthy thing that we're back on focusing on fundamentals.
Do you have to be big and scale to be successful? Can you be small and sustainably profitable and be considered a success by your investors?
Not as a venture capital business, I don't think. I think venture is about scale.
It has to be scale.
It has to be. I mean, yeah, every investor wants you to be both enormous and profitable. And there's just a fine line. And I think that you can be both of those things in the right amount of time, and if you've taken the right steps to get there. But I don't think that small scale profitable businesses are in line with the venture capital model.
What about you, Katia? What do you think?
I mean, I agree. I think if you are going to get venture backed, which is the first question you should ask if you are considering starting a business, is how to finance it. And know that venture is looking for you to do something extremely scalable that is multi-billion dollars and very macro, and that's what you're signing up for. The environment has changed pretty dramatically, and I agree. I think it's been wonderful for our business, and also, of course, insanely challenging, because one thing that I think you can lose sight of as an entrepreneur, as a founder, as somebody who's really involved early stage, is you start to get wrapped up and think like the most important thing you do is around serving the customer, around operating, around the strategy and how it's all coming to fruition. Frankly, it's just as important how you finance the business. And it's a strategy as well, and thinking very strategically about how you're going to approach that and constantly approach them. You're always meeting with people. This is a constant thing. It is never done. So it is a core part of what your job is: managing investors, meeting new investors, thinking about how the market's changing. What are the new products that are out there? What are debt vehicles that you can use? What is the right way to really finance your company should be a real question. But I am interested to see what's going to happen, because yes, this is an important correction and one that I think is great, but I mean, the market will continue to go through the ebbs and flows. And once there are many e-commerce exits that are about massive scale and really about reaching that faster, and they have longer term success. Right now there's only one example, and it's Amazon. Unprofitable business that is really unfocused, but it's basically breaks all the rules of what we're all supposed to think about and prioritize. But once there's more examples, I expect that the market will heat up again, but I think it's really critical to control your own destiny. And don't let anybody and any advice ever make you shift your mentality that you will be in control of your destiny if you control your unit economics. And you can still pursue growth with that.
Britt, what do you think?
Yeah, I actually think profitability is an amazing. It's our number one. It's like on all of our whiteboards, like profitable. But it's actually really amazing for just the freedom you have to pursue different paths forward. for instance, a lot in the media world, like a lot of potential acquirers won't really want to talk to you unless you're profitable. It hits their bottom line ultimately as if they're a public company. Private equity firms, the same thing. And so I think that lever is actually a massive lever in a business in terms of the way that you want to exit. I, at the same time, think that like a lot of entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs think the only way to do it is to raise venture capital. And it's one of the biggest pieces of feedback I give people is to like really think that through, because you can build a good business that's solidly profitable in the millions of dollars and have a great lifestyle and you don't have to carry the burden of the stress that we all go through in terms of venture capitalists and growth numbers and all of those things. So there are pros and cons to both worlds, but the minute you take venture capital, like you have to be off into the races and you have to reach that scale.
Nadia, are there any new kinds of sources of funding that are out there that's not venture capital? I mean, could you go to collective giving networks and stay intimate and stay small?
We haven't done any of those things. I think it probably depends on how much money you're looking to raise. I think debt is probably more of an option than people realize, particularly in the venture debt space. But there's also the idea of just building a business that is profitable from the beginning, and then you don't need anybody's money.
Well, there are things, I mean, like AngelList is really interesting, and now there's syndicates on AngelList, and people are raising multiple millions of dollars through AngelList syndicates. So, people that are collectively investing their money in certain investors who are real humans who invest on behalf of them, and I think that's a viable option. Depending on what you want to launch, if it's a hardware product or consumer good, I still think Kickstarter and those types of options are great ways to test the market. Also, just like test sign-up pages to see if there's traction before you even invest in building a company. Like there are some kind of science labs and other types of companies will test like 50 ideas in any given month, and they'll just put web sign-ups for certain radical product ideas or company ideas and see how many people subscribe to the email list to want to know more. And then they'll sort of double down on whatever was like had the most traction that month and start to build out a prototype. So in the agile approach, like there are a lot of ways you can test how successful your venture might be before you even get it launched.
So let's talk a little bit about the operation of the business itself. It is said that women are more collaborative in how they manage than men are. Katya, you went from co-CEO of Birchbox to sole CEO. So that was a huge adjustment and certainly a big challenge. How's your job different now than it was before?
Extremely different, but at all stages of Birchbox, it was changing all the time. Kind of felt like every 6 months, the job requirement spec just looked dramatically different. Today, what's the biggest difference is not having somebody who's kind of an equal partner where I'm really responsible for managing everyone else's development, happiness, the culture, and it's not about like a shared responsibility, and it's not about us coming together and saying, okay, here's what I need, here's what you need. It's a lot more of me saying, okay, I'm really here to remove the obstacles from your personal development, from the company's goals, and then where I go to get my development has to be elsewhere, right? It has to be the board, a coach, my advisor group that I meet with every few months. So it is extremely different, but it's also, a really fun experience to kind of, a lot of people start their companies, and these are my own words, but I think it's similar for everybody, to meet themselves. That was like a really big reason why I really wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just wanted to know what I was made of. And it feels like this gift of kind of force meeting these new aspects of your personality, even your limitations that you face, and then you decide, am I going to be the kind of person that overcomes this thing that I don't like about myself, or that feels very foreign to me, or am I going to succumb to it? I feel like I'm getting to know myself so much better in this job than I have prior.
Nadia, when we talk about collaboration, you've brought in a lot of your customers as members of your staff. I mean, you've taken them on, and it kind of happened naturally. Can you walk us through how that transpired?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the places where we wanted to be very specific and tangible in how we remain customer-centric. And one of the tools that we have is to bring customers into the business. So we are actually 80% women across the organization, and that's primarily because we want to be as reflective of our customer as possible. It keeps us customer honest at every level of decision making that happens in the organization. And I think is one of the guardrails that we've really put up successfully, so that despite the fact that we have grown very quickly, the focus on why we're all here has never been lost.
And Britt, of course, you had a big pivot early on in your business. I mean, you're firmly a media company now, but at one point you actually thought about being a suite of apps rather than a content provider.
Yeah, I was interested in how you could build a hub of content and use that to convert somebody to do something. And that day, in late 2011, early 2012, apps were still all the rage. At this point, obviously, I think most people consume content through a number of apps during the day, not hundreds anymore. But that was sort of the premise, is like if you could build an audience that were interested in certain topics. We thought about the life stages like weddings and parenting and food and things like that. Could you then give them utilitarian apps to help them along those paths of life? So we built like the ultimate wedding website creator, where I was getting married at the time, so I was very into this. Like you could connect all of your guests through a Facebook API. So you could combine people that had similar interests to connect them ahead of time before the wedding and make social seating charts and all these things. I actually used this at my wedding, by the way, and it worked really well. We had like a number of hookups that happened, and my dad and my husband's fraternity brother, like both were interested in trucks, and they sat next to each other at the table and like are now BFFs. So I'm just saying, early success. But what we saw was that a lot of our users were just way more engaged with the content and kept like writing to us asking for like more content and more different types of content, and so we decided to again like keep that focus and double down, and we saw the revenue opportunities as a kind of disruptive digital media company and decided to go that route. But yeah, it's like always listen to the data and focus on what your audience is telling you they want more of.
All right, let's stay with collaboration, but we're talking about collaboration between work and life, because I know you're a working mom, Katya. Britt, you were in your late in your pregnancy when you were going around raising money for your business. There's no way to hide the fact that you're going to be taking leave at some point.
Actually, I needed to raise during my last trimester. I have 2 kids, of the first kid. And to be honest, some of my board members and advisors suggested that we bridge the company a couple months to get through that period so that I could have the baby and then go fundraise, because there was perception that there might be bias towards me in the investor community if I were like 8 months pregnant and fundraising, especially with the first child. I think for some reason with the first child, there's a lot of fear that as a new mom, you might totally freak out and like ditch the company and just want to be with the baby all the time, or have postpartum or a number of factors. So I obviously thought it was crazy, but I couldn't really argue, and so I did that. But what that meant was there was not really a maternity leave. I had the baby, I got like a month or so of rest, and then like was right up and at it fundraising for our Series B round of the company. So yeah, it's very stressful, and it's difficult to raise a child. I actually think that for founders and CEOs who have children, it's hard to take maternity leave, and it's partially because you don't want to. Like, you want to stay connected in some way to the business, even if that's not working 100% of the time. You want to at least scan your email and make sure nothing's on fire. So I feel like the rules should sort of shift in some ways for what's expected of working moms who are CEOs and founders. But everyone should have their own choice, of course. Like, you should be able to do what you want to do.
Katya, tell us about your situation, because
my situation is great.
Let me rephrase.
No, it's fine. So I got pregnant with twins my first round. Magical surprise. And yeah, no, I think I and everybody was like, what the hell is going to happen to her? And it was really hard. So I actually took 3 months maternity leave. I mean, I couldn't not take maternity leave that long. I was like physically feeding a human 20 hours a day. Two humans for 20 hours a day. So like a human was like physically attached to my body for that long. So I had to take maternity leave. And it was really great. It was the right time for the business. It gave me a lot of clarity. I'm pregnant with my third. Surprise.
Congratulations.
And feels awesome because it's 1. So it's going to be super easy, total layup. But look, I mean, I honestly, people ask all the time, like, how do you do it? How do you do it? And New York is like built for it, to make this happen. You know, I think certain people are built for it. I find myself to be like a far superior leader as a mother. It is extremely challenging those initial months to get like oriented, situated, yes, sleep. First of all, you're not sleeping anyways. And that was something people kept scaring me about, like sleep. And I'm like, what do you think we do as founders? Like, we literally don't sleep. Like, we're in training for sleep training an infant. Like, we know how to do this. And, you know, the thing that I like didn't really understand, but it is actually pretty logical, was what it would do to my productivity to actually rest. And rest is different from sleep. So if you think about it, before I had children, the first 4 years of Birchbox, I was never not thinking about Birchbox, ever. I mean, in a soul cycle class, in a social setting, and frankly, everyone was like pulling it out of me. Everyone's like, oh, Birchbox, right? So I'm like giving it, taking feedback, like eating it up, right? So every waking hour of my day was like conversation about Birchbox. Now I have about 2 hours a day and then like all of my weekends to have like these moments that are just not about work. And so I rest my brain. I'm like more creative, very grateful for my experience like when I'm with my kids, and very grateful to have something for me. And I like I said, I mean, I feel like it's a better experience with kids than I could have imagined. But trust me, like those first 3 months, you're like, how the hell? I mean, the truth be told, like the first like 6 months are a really interesting time. But I try to tell women, like, don't make an assessment of how you're doing those first 6 months. Like, give yourself time to like have this new reality, to adjust your schedule, to give yourself permission and be nice to yourself before you assess really how you're going to make changes in your work life and in your career.
Nadia, what are your thoughts? Does this change how people think about their timeline when they expand their business, they launch their business?
So I do not have children, although I am now looking forward to it even more.
Are you pregnant?
And I am not pregnant.
Okay.
But you know, I think that there's an opportunity in life to do many things, and I think that one of the most important things as you know, female professionals is to stay focused on what you're focused on now, and then begin to focus on the next step when you are in the next step. And for me, that means that I can stay focused on the business that we're building for however long. You know, my situation is what it is, and then there'll be a new kind of set of challenges and a new set of experiences. And you know, as long as you live only in one moment at a time, I think the anxiety and the worry and the pre-planning that you really shouldn't be doing before you need to becomes easy to avoid.
All right, before we open it up to questions from the audience, I wanted to get from each of you the worst advice that you've ever gotten regarding your business, because there's lots of noise out there. There are a lot of people who want to offer advice, but it's not applicable to you or to your business. Britt, why don't we start with you?
Why didn't you start this with your husband? Like, honestly, they thought that my husband would help propel my business to be even more successful. And just that notion of needing to rely on anybody, especially your husband or a man, was pretty terrible advice, I think. So
how did you answer them?
I said, I'm competent enough to do this myself, and in fact, he knows nothing about media.
So you don't want him in charge?
Right, yeah.
Nadia?
The worst advice that we get is anybody who's giving us advice on our customer who has no business giving us advice on our customer, which is the vast majority of people who choose to give us advice. But you know, I think we work with a customer that has, there are all kinds of preconceived notions around who this woman is. And the truth is that politely declining advice is a critical skill as a founder.
How do you say it? How do you do it?
Thank you for your thoughts.
Point taken. Doesn't mean you're going to do anything with it, right?
I'm going to delete this email, but you don't have to know that.
Katya?
One of the earliest meetings I remember was when we were trying to fundraise for Birchbox after we had done the beta. It was actually a really unsuccessful try to fundraise initially. And one of the meetings we took with somebody who's supposed to be a really brilliant, prolific angel investor, about 30 seconds into the meeting, it was like 3 minutes, he said, "But do we really need the box?"
What, really?
And I was like, Excuse me? The whole product, like, he's like, is that really like a necessary part of like,
I like everything but the box.
I just remember, I don't think I was as polite. I was like, I think I have another meeting to go to. It was so profound. We weren't communicating well, which is something I try to think about a lot. Sometimes when we got a lot of no's, both from brands and from investors. And one thing I try to think about is like, how are we communicating and can we make it more compelling? But that was a hysterical meeting.
All right, why don't we open it up to questions from the audience? And there are a lot of questions. Do we have a microphone that we can pass around? No?
Yell.
Then you'll just have to speak really, really loudly. Sir?
Is there something within each of your businesses that's a technology component that has steered you in a particular direction that you're really proud of?
Sure. For my business, we use data frequently throughout the day. Like many people in the office, their screens look sort of like Bloomberg terminals. They're just looking at data and reacting throughout the day, and that's some of the technology that we built. Secondly, just with the way the media industry has shifted even in the last year to two, a lot of what we're building is actually off-site and off-platform. We're building on technologies within Facebook and Pinterest and social platforms at large. So we're thinking a lot about how people consume content, where they consume content, and how to build a specialized experience for that. So I would say stay tuned because there's more coming there.
Good teaser.
Yeah, for us, it's definitely personalization and machine learning. That is a core part of what the vision for Birchbox was, but initially we didn't have anybody in-house to do that, so we had to really fudge it for a long time. So the first few boxes, we weren't personalizing it as public. We started personalizing a little bit, and then eventually when we got to a certain scale, now, since we're shipping over 1 million boxes every month, this has to be like a core competency. So it's building a proprietary way of like ingesting the data about product and then about humans, and then having your own calculation for what we call like happiness, which is not that simple because it's not just about exactly personalization and it's not just exactly about like a brand or a product, but it's a mix of those things as well as the look and feel. And so that's what we continue to invest in.
So I'd say in addition to all the data science work that I think every business needs to be doing these days, one of the most important technology decisions that we made was to build our entire tech stack ourselves. So there's a temptation with an e-commerce business to try to use something off the shelf. We knew that we wanted flexibility in the product that we were building, and third-party software did not provide that, and so we made the investment very early. We've never worked on a third-party software.
I'm going to continue to hold this mic if somebody else doesn't take it.
One
One more
more question,
question. Is there anything that's changed your buying patterns personally?
Good question.
Yeah, so what we tapped into with Birchbox, the insight around the beauty majority, I think comes from a larger shift that's happening, which I call passive consumption. I think that is the thing that's changed my buying behavior immensely. There's been businesses inspired by Birchbox that are really about letting the consumer continue to sit back relatively passively, but heighten their experience in the transaction. So for example, I don't really grocery shop anymore for my husband and I use Plated. I don't have to have this question every week, which like made me so upset of like, what do you want for dinner this week? Whatever you want, honey, right? Like infuriating. So Plated allows me to like have a smaller decision set, and then he cooks the meal, and it's incredible. Things like Nadia's business and Stitch Fix and wine clubs and trunk club. I think all of those things can really change your potential for engagement without you having to do a ton of research and the work and whatever all the other things come with it, the confidence to go and change.
I think one of the things that's been interesting for me building a business that's customer centric is experiencing how other businesses treat me as a customer, and how are they actually learning about me? How are my experiences changing? And I think I do hold businesses to a higher standard now of the service that they offer, because if I am truly in their customer base, then it should reflect more what I want.
I would just say distributed commerce, and I think we're still seeing that play out, but the idea that you can either find products or learn more about products anywhere you go on the web. And I think Instagram is still under monetized because they have such a massive amount of intent and inspiration that exists there. So I'm curious to see like the future of what types of platforms they'll build out for people to sell more products on Instagram.
Mm-hmm. All right, next question, ma'am, over there.
Hi, my name is Elaine Daniels, founder of The Valley Beat, and thank you guys so much for speaking on capitalism. Nadia, congratulations, Katie, on
new arrival. And Britt, thank you for speaking on analytics. My question is, how do you guys stay customer honest and continuously get data to make sure that you are not only having a good product, but that you're constantly creating new products that your customer will need?
Nadia, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so we use the word customer honest all the time, and part of the way that we do that is to bring our customer into every decision. I think that there is actually, I think that you have to be very specific about how you interact with customers, because if you simply ask a customer what they want, they're unlikely to actually tell you the business that you should build. And so really being very specific about understanding what motivations you're trying to unearth and what that means about how you should be serving a customer, I think is probably one of the most important things that we learned. Never ask your customer what they want. Try to listen for what they're feeling or what they're saying they're looking for. One of a book that I read recently that I thought was phenomenal is a book called Competing Against Luck. And one of the things that, there's actually an interview guide in that book that I found really interesting. Listening for workarounds, listening for things that people are doing that as soon as you hear them, you realize that is not the most direct way to that outcome. And actually thinking about, once you find a lot of workarounds, what that means about what the core product should be.
Nadia?
Yeah, so just very similarly, one thing that we did that was lucky, I'd say, I mean, we brought somebody in early on who had the background of really understanding how to interact with customers so that you don't, waste anybody's time, their time or your time. But we have focus groups constantly of people who are both current, active, like the, apex of customers who are not really engaged a lot, and past churned customers to better understand their motivations. But I would totally agree. I think one thing that can be a fallacy when you have such direct access to the customer is to listen to what they say and then react almost exactly, with an exact response. Consumers, especially in discretionary categories, they still want to be taken on a journey, right? You need to surpass their expectations. So that means first you have to understand their expectations, build a relationship, and then take them on the journey of like where you're going.
Yeah, for us, again, it goes back to sort of understanding data, and it's, again, different for us than these gals, because we're creating so much content on a daily basis that we're actually following the trends, and therefore we can almost predict the next trends or how long a trend will be around. And for our category in particular, I mean, obviously we're in different verticals, from beauty and food and style to crafting and some of the more creative arts, but like watercolor, for instance, is like a trend right now, and it's been here for a while. And so like we can sort of predict whether or not that's going to go out of fashion or not. Lettering is a really big trend right now, and women really want to learn lettering and like calligraphy and specialized forms
those
of it.
videos for like way too long.
Yeah, it's
the
sort of
lettering
like,
videos are, it's like a trap.
There's an Instagram account called
So
Oddly Stimulating,
So
and you're like, wow, like you just watch it.
So
It's just
good.
weird stuff that like goo and I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, we sort of see this on a daily basis, and then again, are starting to think about how to incorporate that knowledge into the commerce side of our business as well.
How would you start again to build a readership base? If you had to start it tomorrow, what would you use?
So yeah, it's a really interesting question, because the media world has totally turned on its head in the last 12 months with like the rise of social platforms and people putting content natively there. And a lot of people would probably tell you, like, I would go Facebook only and like build like a giant readership, or Instagram only, or Snapchat only. The problem with that is that advertisers are actually still buying owned and operated properties. And I think that's going to shift in the next 12 to 24 months as people wake up to the idea that most people are consuming content on like one of 5 different websites and apps. And so if you put your content there, you're going to reach the most people. But for now, I think if I were starting all over again, I would probably go all in, knowing that like it would be a little bit more difficult to ramp up revenue in the beginning. I would also go 80-20 video to editorial. I think video content right now has the opportunity to be the next television. You're seeing a lot of TV networks completely kind of merge into digital. You're seeing Verizon launch Go 90 and Comcast launch Watchable, and Facebook's creating apps for Apple TV and so on and so forth. So the television is completely morphing right now, and it's going to be more lucrative than ever in the next few years.
Thank you, ladies, for being here. We often hear and read these stories about how, women in tech are treated, or women in entrepreneurship are treated by other men. But like, especially in this climate, it's very important for entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs to have a community. So what are some ways that you ladies collaborate, champion, and support other women in those two industries rather than being competitive? And what some ways that you ladies are paying it forward now for other women in tech and women in entrepreneurship?
Good question.
So Brit & Co is, our heart of what we do is to empower women. Like Katya has spoken at our big conference that we do every year called Remake. We've profiled Birchbox. We've done collaborations. We need to get you there this year. We profile women badasses like all the time, and especially in this climate. Like, we are very active at the Women's March and any decision that impacts women's rights. Showcasing women throughout history who have done courageous things, women immigrants. Like, it's sort of the nuts and bolts of what we do. And as a content company, we're able to do that. It's probably different for different businesses. But outside of that, and just like in the social club of entrepreneurs, I think we're always going to each other for advice and thoughts and like, hey, I'm doing a collaboration. Yeah, we want to do more partnerships together and help prop each other up. So I see a lot of that happening. I don't know if you guys
I think
have
it's
different.
a unique time. Even when we started Birchbox 6.5 years ago, I didn't see women coming together in the way that they are today. It almost feels like this incredible time where we are like, wow, it doesn't have to be me. If it can be you, like, that even is so powerful. So I'd say, like, what Britt is alluding to, like, I just say yes to women, right? Like, say yes to women, say yes to like things that are female focused. And I think early on in my career I was a little bit more hesitant to be on a women's panel, to do all women's things, because I didn't want to be seen as only women. We have a very legitimate business in a massive industry, and that somehow felt, I was defensive about it, and I just feel 100% differently about it. And then, there's a lot of micro things. I say yes to women, so women who email me and are like, I want to meet, and can you help me with like random problem starting a company? I make time, and it's fulfilling, and it's both, it fulfills me, and I hope that it makes a small difference in trying to give them little nuggets of shortcuts. But mostly my message to women who are starting businesses is nobody has all of the answers. I don't have all the answers. I have made countless mistakes. The difference between somebody who is an entrepreneur and who is an aspiring entrepreneur is that you will make the decision, that you like pursue something, right? And then you try to turn that into the right decision. And if you can't, you pivot, right? So, we could do more. I'm really trying to rack my brain, frankly, in the last year about how we will do more, because it's imperative that we do more.
So one specific thing that I started doing, which is not a financially responsible thing for me to do, but I've started writing very small angel checks, primarily to female entrepreneurs. At the beginning, we could not raise money from any institutional investor under the sun, and the people who got us off the ground were angels. And I think going back to the point around saying if you have traction, people will pay attention, giving female founders an opportunity to create traction by even having a small amount of capital at the beginning is something that's been a really actionable way for me to get involved.
In the back over there.
Hi, Tatiana. Thank you so much for being here today. I was wondering if you could speak more about your beta testing days. Specifically, how you were able to get awareness from your consumers at an early stage, so then investors would potentially be interested in investing.
Sure. I'm Katya, by the way. Cool.
Yes,
happens
very
all the
cool.
time.
I know.
So our beta test was really critical to this launch of Birchbox. We decided that we were going to do it the last few months of business school, and we would have 200 women test the concept for a few months, 2 months to be exact. So in the test, we designed it to raise money. Our ambition was to raise money from it. So we set milestones that we could speak to investors about. One was the fundamental question that everybody was questioning, which was, would consumers pay for samples? The second was, would brands that were massive known entities work with us? Because we knew that if we had only independent brands, that would be a challenge to building our brand. And third was, would the subscription service, the actual sampling of product, lead to a full-size sale? So that was what we went out to test. We also didn't allow our friends and family to join the beta because we really knew that we needed real data. So we asked our friends and family to forward the emails and to, to help just describe what the product is, and then people paid upfront because there was no way we could architect a rebilling, right? So people paid upfront for 2 months, $20, and we sent the initial boxes. And I mean, two things happened that I think are good to know from the beta. One is it was a profound shift for me in thinking what we were setting out to do, because frankly, we started Birchbox as business school students who saw a market inefficiency. And we thought beauty brands are spending billions of dollars to try to get your attention, and actually billions of dollars on samples that nobody uses. And consumers are spending billions of dollars on product that ends in a graveyard under your sink, and we'll make the market more efficient, and we will grow as a company and have success from that. But when we saw the emotional response that people had from this, that this was something missing in their life, that this was such an emotional category, that I really just hadn't anticipated that, it changed our motivation and changed the way we thought about what we were doing, from maybe building a product to building a brand. And how are we going to stand for something different? The second thing that happened from the beta was we could not raise money out of the beta. So we had a lot of traction. We were in business school, and a lot of people were interested at that very moment in time when it was happening. But when we went from like in between time from beta to launch, that was a terrible time to raise money. People were like, well, just call me when you launch, right? And we were like, well, we need money. So it was a really challenging time. We ended up having to borrow money from friends and family and put our heads down. And it went from feeling like we felt like we were hot. I mean, we checked those 3 questions like unequivocally, like this is a massive success. We're going to be huge. 2nd place in the Harvard Business School business plan competition. And we were like, yes, and then no. So it took traction again. It took launching again to get people back at the table. The beta results really, really helped. I think mostly us have confidence and know what to do next. But the real launch and being in the launch period or actually operating was a critical part to fundraising and having traction and having momentum, and then bringing multiple people to the table and having a successful raise.
Next, ma'am?
That's keeping you up at night.
Aside from politics, you mean? Or in addition to politics?
The number 2 thing that's keeping you up at night.
Besides babies, you mean? Number 3 thing. Profitability. Like I said, we're very close to that juncture, and it's a huge pivotal moment for a business, like I've explained. So I'm really excited about that. And I guess like sort of coupled with that is just the diversification of revenue. We now have multiple revenue lines, and I think that's a really great place to be. It sort of balances the business from risk of any kind. So I'm really excited about that and continuing to like balance that out across the business.
I'd say team. I think as a founder, your number one worry and use of time is team building. At least that's been the case for us. And we're in an exciting place where we're actually building out our executive team, which is a full-time job. But incredibly exciting, and I think firmly believe that what makes a good company great are the people. So I think it's time well spent.
I think I'm thinking a lot about velocity of change right now and the implications on team, as well as the implications on product and where you invest your time, your resources, right? Money, time. So trying to keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening externally to think about, how are you going to continue to develop a relevant product, and who's developing this like micro aspects of something that you can utilize in your product is something I think about. But also the velocity of change has a lot of implications on org. And to what Nadia said, I think it's actually something that none of us feel we spend enough time on, is like how are we going to continue to invest in the human capital and create opportunities that aren't just opportunities that come with job titles. Opportunities are experiences, opportunities are training, and frankly, like the US isn't set up in a way where there's really role models around how are you going to build a business that is, not just a good place to work, not just a great place to work, but, a hybrid between like a business and a school, where you're actually developing your talent and investing back in them, because that's the only way your product's going to stay relevant. Frankly, your idea as the founder becomes really unimportant quickly, right? It's their ideas, and it's what the future of the business will be. And again, if you have a dedication to your consumer, you're lucky because the next generation of your company and the next generation of the product will come from your team, but that requires a lot of investment in that and thinking about how to do that, what's the right time, given profitability. I mean, so many things to think about.
Final question, ma'am, in the back.
I really want to continue on the topic of team, and if diversity, equity, inclusion is important to you guys, and can you talk about how you're building your teams and if that plays into how you build them?
What's ironic, probably for all, 70% of our employees are female, and then beyond that, we represent every type of ethnic background, I believe, and as a content company, we try very hard to showcase those backgrounds in the content. We've actually never hired a model for anything we've done. Sort of because it's expensive, but also because we want to showcase real women, and they're sitting in our office already, and they're of all different backgrounds. So we don't even have to seek it out. And when these investors and old white men walk into our office, I think they're blown away because they've never been in such a female environment before.
Yeah, I think our office probably makes some people uncomfortable too. But
in what way?
We are a company that is very representative of our customer, and we are based in Manhattan. And I think that you come off the street of Manhattan into our office, and you think that maybe you're in a different planet. It's just a really fun place to be, and people are themselves, and there's people laughing from our team, so you know that it's true. But our approach to that has been really around customer centricity and the idea that if we are truly going to live, breathe, eat, have this customer in our veins, she should be at the table all the time, and not in the Jeff Bezos metaphorical sense, but literally. And so that's the reason why we're 80% female. We also just have an exceptional team, and they happen to be female.
It's a critical part of what we do, and I'd say again, going back to what I've said, something you can never spend enough time on. Where I think probably about 65% women, mostly because we also have a male product, and actually, that's a critical part of what we think the future is going to be too, for us. But I think there has to be more of an overt effort there, if that's what you're asking. I personally feel like it. I'm a Hispanic woman, and I know that I represent, the majority of the country now. And yeah, it's something that, I don't think we put enough emphasis on. It's not something I necessarily lead with for all the reasons why I never tried to lead as being a woman. But now more than ever, I think it's important for us to have more overt conversations about it and get uncomfortable. And I'm actually really curious about how we're going to get uncomfortable as leaders to have conversations that don't ostracize anybody, right? Because that is the only way it's going to be productive. It's not about my views, it's about everybody's views, and how are we going to let them all live on the same planet and not ignore that they exist, right? We actually have to do more than acknowledge they exist. We have to work out how we're going to work together. So I think there's so much more to do.
All right, before we give our panelists a round of applause, I want to bring up Dean Dan of Cornell Tech.
Hey everyone, so this is a part of a series for those of you who haven't been here before, Cornell Tech at Bloomberg. And I want to say that this panel has had the biggest response in terms of people signing up to be here and being here. And I think
overflow rooms.
Yep, overflow room and everything. So to people who are out there in TV land and only experiencing this panel through a camera lens, but no, really, I think that really amazing panel, and something that speaks certainly to women entrepreneurs, but I think to everybody in the room, not just to women and men, to all of those Facebook gender profiles. I think that the discussion of what it takes to be an entrepreneur, and in some sense, almost every entrepreneur makes themselves a minority at the time that they're doing it. And so I think that really a tremendous set of things. So I wanted to just briefly say that the next one of these, and I see it behind me up here, so I don't actually have to remember, is on March 7th. Ben Lehrer from Thrillist will be joining us. So please sign up and come see that. Also, I just want to say a little word about Cornell Tech. We're opening on our permanent campus on Roosevelt Island in time for next fall. We've been in Google's building in Lower Manhattan for the last 4 years, and that's been super exciting. But opening the new campus is something that I really can't wait to be doing. We're in the middle of admitting a bunch of really outstanding students for that year. We have amazing folks this year. Some of the stats I'm proudest of, as a tech school, we do have about a third women, which in the tech industry, I think is, not good enough, but way ahead of many others. We've spun 30 companies out of Cornell Tech already, and several of those with women co-founders. So it's a really dynamic part of the New York City tech ecosystem, and I'm really excited to be part of it. But really, thanks so much to the panel.
Thank you very much to Britt Morin of Brit & Co., Nadia Bujara of Dia, and of course, Katya Beecham of Birchbox. Thank you for your time, ladies.